But Marvel's history goes back further than most fans realize, and not every early character made the journey into the modern era. During the Golden Age, Marvel introduced heroes, adventurers, and strange concepts that once carried entire stories before slowly fading into obscurity. Some were replaced, some no longer fit changing trends, and others were simply left behind as the universe evolved. They weren't erased overnight, but over time, they became names only dedicated fans still remember. But which forgotten figures disappeared the hardest? Here are 10 Golden Age characters Marvel wants you to forget. At number 10 is Arcus, or the Vision. This character officially entered Marvel's universe during the chaotic days of the 1940s. Before he was a high-tech android, the original Vision was Arcus, an alien law enforcement officer from Smoke World who teleported across the universe exclusively through chimney smoke, fog, or tobacco fumes. The entire premise behind this character was a mechanical dead end for early writers. This exact moment on the page proves just how wild comic history really was. A giant, green-skinned, cloaked alien policeman literally manifests out of a gangster's cigar smoke to choke him. Relying exclusively on smoke to travel was simply too limiting for comic creators to sustain across monthly issues. Instead of trying to fix his convoluted mechanics, editors buried him in the archives and simply usurped his legendary name for the iconic New Avengers android in 1968, effectively removing the strange cosmic cop forever, leaving him stranded as a utterly forgotten relic of the early comic era. At number 9 is Dynamic Man, or Kurt Cowan, and synthetic android named Kurt Cowan debuted in Mystic Comics issue 1 as a laboratory creation engineered for peak evolutionary perfection. Though granted flight and invulnerability, his psychological profile centered on a disturbing, fanatical hostility toward ordinary civilians suffering from physical frailties or perceived weaknesses. The original blueprint guiding this bizarre protagonist fundamentally detaches from current superhero logic. His vintage panels showcase him shredding his ordinary business suits to expose his metallic physique, shouting venomous rants regarding the genetic inferiority of mankind compared to his engineered flesh. Such aggressive rhetoric inadvertently mirrored real-world eugenics doctrines, making him an incredibly uncomfortable read even in early continuity. Rather than softening his historical rough edges, modern writers handled the blunder by leaning entirely into his fanatical hatred. In continuity, he was exposed as a mass-murdering supremacist, and his reign ended when heroes used fire to melt the arrogant android into a literal, smoking slag heap. At number 8 is the Black Widow, or Clairvoyant. This character officially entered Marvel's universe during the chaotic days of the 1940s. Long before Natasha Romanoff, the original Black Widow was clairvoyant, a spirit medium whose curse inadvertently killed her own clients. When a surviving victim murdered her in revenge, she was sent to Hell, where Satan resurrected her with a death-touch superpower to function as his personal executioner. A definitive splash page features her actively reporting to a grinning devil. But as the comic book industry evolved and strict censorship codes tightened, a Satan-worshipping protagonist became wholly unpublishable. She was swiftly abandoned, and her legendary codename was handed to a certain Russian spy decades later. The brutal reality is that she was a total industry failure. Editors realized they could never sustain a serial killer who literally worked for the underworld. They didn't just hide her because of modern corporate branding, they buried her because her very existence violated the fundamental rules of standard hero comics. If you think a literal agent of Satan is wild, we haven't even scratched the surface of Marvel's abandoned ideas. Coming up in points 7, 6, 5, and 4, we have characters whose concepts were so deeply flawed, redundant, or purely bizarre that the industry had to wipe them from the front line entirely. At number 7 is Secret Stamp, or Jerry Randall. A powerless teenager named Jerry Randall emerged in Captain America Comics issue 13 as a costumed vigilante whose sole motivation was hunting Axis saboteurs. Lacking combat training or special abilities, his entire crime-fighting methodology relied on physically printing government war finance logos onto the flesh of subdued enemies using a common wooden office stamp. This absurd gimmick exposes the highly disposable nature of wartime propaganda characters. Vintage illustrations depict him physically stamping bruised foreign operatives to directly promote war bonds. He functioned strictly as a shallow, one-note advertisement rather than a fully realized literary figure. He didn't suffer a tragic demise or a dramatic editorial deletion. The second the war ended and the propaganda expired, writers promptly abandoned him. Without a massive global conflict to sell stamps for, he lacked any true narrative appeal, forcing the comic industry to permanently leave him rotting in the forgotten bins of vintage publishing history. At number 6 is Marvex the Super Robot. An artificial being hailing from an advanced outer dimension debuted in Daring Mystery Comics issue 3 after destroying its own creators. Escaping to Earth, this newly conscious machine chose to blend into human society by donning a wool fedora alongside tailored corporate attire to secure employment as a standard office clerk, ignoring its own faceless skull crafted from riveted metal plating. This jarring narrative trajectory creates a bizarre juxtaposition that sharply detaches from traditional heroic fiction. Vintage panels depict the massive automaton politely greeting corporate executives to request desk work, presenting a visual aesthetic akin to a modern slasher antagonist. This eerie presentation forms a massive roadblock for any cohesive library. The severe visual dissonance between an interdimensional machine with a terrifying metal skull and a guy wanting to file paperwork was a severe tonal misfire. It clashed heavily with standard design principles, causing editors to let Marvex rot silently in the archives without a single second thought. At number 5 is the Finn, or Peter Noble. A naval officer named Peter Noble surfaced in Daring Mystery Comics issue 7 after surviving a devastating submarine wreckage deep at sea. Discovering an accidental ability to extract oxygen from water, he recovered an ancient enchanted cutlass from the seafaring depths and immediately assumed absolute leadership over an isolated underwater civilization known as Neptunia. This spontaneous aquatic origin establishes a highly convoluted narrative that disrupts established fictional geography. Vintage pages portray this half-naked monarch commanding a ferocious, massive marine beast across ocean trenches, wielding his blade to cleave hostile military vessels. This derivative lore presents a massive structural complication for current world builders. Because his creator recycled concepts directly from his own high-profile property, Namor the Submariner, this redundant aquatic commonwealth fatally fractures the tightly synchronized mythology surrounding Atlantis. Unable to compete with the original, Noble and his kingdom slowly faded into the background, existing only as obscure trivia until absorbed by the modern new invaders later. At number 4 is Captain Wonder, or Jeff Jordan. A high school science teacher named Jeff Jordan debuted in Kid Comics issue 1 after spending years secretly synthesizing an unregulated chemical compound inside a school laboratory. Instead of a freak accident, Jordan successfully perfected a substance known as Wonder Fluid, rubbing the chemical elixir directly onto his skin to grant himself the physical strength of 12 men. This bizarre basement cosmetic origin is a prime example of lazy early comic writing that couldn't survive modern continuity standards. Depicting an educator rubbing homebrew mutagens onto his skin to fight crime is a bizarre trope that editors eventually realized lacked the necessary narrative weight needed for a lasting property. He was a total industry failure. Relying on unregulated chemical lotions to write your heroes is a terribly broken storytelling crutch, leading directly to his swift, permanent, and entirely justified cancellation from the Marvel printing press. The concept of gaining amazing powers from absolute laboratory incompetence just didn't hold up, forcing writers to swiftly delete his embarrassing timeline from the active universe forever. But now, we're entering the truly impossible cases, where these characters became so bizarre that modern Marvel practically had no choice but to erase them. At number 3 is Red Raven. An avian-themed orphan emerged in Red Raven Comics issue 1 after a wilderness aviation disaster marooned him atop a concealed, levitating landmass populated by winged humanoids. Equipped with mechanical artificial wings, he originally just fought standard street-level criminals. But modern continuity needed a reason for his decades-long disappearance. In a heavy-handed 1978 retcon in the pages of The Defenders, writers revealed that his adoptive birdmen possessed a global invasion strategy. Red Raven responded by deploying anesthetic vapor to induce a mass coma before sinking their entire city beneath the waves. This drastic, dark lore adjustment intentionally broke the character, turning him into the architect of his own people's eradication. The comic industry used this endless stasis and profound psychological fragmentation as a highly convenient narrative excuse to keep this utterly shattered concept off the board permanently. Having a hero actively bury his own civilization just didn't work. Writers quickly realized this horrible origin change made him highly radioactive, ensuring his very permanent, well-deserved comic book exile forever. At number 2 is The Witness. An unnamed human detective materialized in Mystic Comics issue 7 following a suicide attempt after accidentally shooting an innocent man. Denied entry into the afterlife, he was sent back to Earth as an incorporeal spirit phantom. Swearing to only observe crimes as penance, he possessed a clairvoyant awareness of impending homicides, but was supernaturally barred from actively altering unfolding events. This passive methodology directly reverses the core conventions of an action comic. Vintage panels depict this trench-coated figure lurking within shadows, calmly inhaling tobacco while a captive citizen is brutally tormented inches away. A central figure anchored by systemic, ghostly inaction presents a fundamentally broken pacing structure. A hero who is literally forced to just watch people die was a catastrophic failure in execution. Writers abandoned him because he ruined the pacing of every issue. In an industry built entirely around dynamic fights and intense rescues, a protagonist who literally just stands there smoking a cigarette while civilians are slaughtered was a massively unpublishable mistake. At number 1 is Electro the Marvel robot, a colossal mechanized entity debuted in Marvel Mystery Comics issue 4, constructed by an eccentric academic named Philo Zog. Operated through a specialized wireless transmitter, this immense iron automaton patrolled metropolitan thoroughfares, crushing petty larceny through sheer, catastrophic physical force. This primitive robotic premise introduces a highly disruptive element to early fictional history. Vintage pages depict this towering steel prototype, outfitted with glowing ocular lenses and rigid metallic jaws, striding through urban centers, seizing fleeing suspects by their limbs and hurling them over multi-story buildings. This destructive behavior fundamentally broke the power scaling of early street-level stories. Injecting an invulnerable automaton to fight standard mobsters removed all narrative tension. He was simply too overpowered for the genre. Realizing the concept was a dead end for serialized storytelling, writers promptly sealed the asset away, reintroducing the rusted chassis strictly as inactive inventory. Which forgotten Golden Age character deserves another chance? Comment your pick, subscribe now, and turn on notifications for more Marvel deep dives.